It's the smell of the hydraulic fluid that gets to me even now. Sometimes I'll be sitting in my chair at the home and I'll catch a whiff of something. Maybe it's just the cleaning fluid they use on the floors, but for a split second, I'm back in that cockpit. I'm 20 years old again, and my hands are shaking so hard I have to sit on them just to keep from losing my nerve. People think the war was all about the big maps and the generals, but for me, it was the vibration. That constant bone-rattling hum of the Pratt & Whitney engine. It didn't feel like a machine. It felt like a beast that was just as scared as I was, trying its best to stay in the air when everything in the world wanted us to come crashing down. I remember the way the canopy glass felt cold against my forehead when I leaned forward to check the instruments. Everything was mechanical then, no computers, no screens, just dials and needles that danced and twitched, telling you if you were about to live or die. The other boys in the squadron, they used to call me low-level Lawson. They didn't mean it as a compliment at first. They thought I was a damn fool. They'd see me coming back with leaves caught in my tail gear or bits of French hedgerow stuck in the air intake. They'd say, "Henry, one of these days you're going to try to fly under a cow's belly and we're going to have to scrape you off a pasture in Normandy." I'd just laugh and wipe the grease off my face. But truth was, I wasn't being brave. I was just terrified of the flak. Up high, the German 88s could see you. They'd fill the sky with those black puffs of smoke, and you just have to fly through it and pray that the shrapnel didn't have your name on it. But down low? Down where the trees almost scraped the belly of my P-47? Down there, you were a ghost. You were gone before they could even crank the handles on their guns. Or at least, that's what I told myself to keep from losing my mind. I still see those hedgerows in my sleep. They weren't just bushes. They were ancient walls of earth and stone, covered in centuries of tangled roots and thick greenery. To the guys on the ground, the infantry, they were a nightmare. Every field was a fortress. But from the air, at 400 miles an hour, they looked like the stitching on a giant green quilt. And beneath that stitching, the Germans were hiding. They had their Panzers tucked away under camouflage nets, engines silent, waiting for our boys to crawl into the open. That's what haunts me, knowing that for every tank I missed, a dozen American boys wouldn't be coming home to their mothers. It was July, right after the breakout at Saint-Lô. The air was thick and heavy, the kind of heat that makes your flight suit stick to your back before you even get the engine turned over. We were operating out of a dirt strip, just a carved-out piece of French farmland that turned into a dust bowl every time a flight took off. My jug, that's what we called the P-47 Thunderbolt, was loaded for bear. 2 500-pound bombs under the wings and a belly tank full of fuel. She felt heavy, sluggish, like she didn't want to leave the ground. I remember taxiing out and seeing the dust clouds kicked up by the guys ahead of me. I couldn't see a thing. I just had to trust that the tail in front of me was moving. When I finally got her up, the air felt thin. I didn't climb. I never liked climbing. I leveled off just above the tree line and headed toward the front. The radio was a mess of static and screaming. Ground controllers were begging for help. The Germans were making a push, trying to cut our lines, and they had armor, lots of it. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would break. I checked my gun switches, 850 caliber machine guns. It's a hell of a lot of firepower, but against a Tiger or a Panzer, it's like throwing pebbles at a barn door. You had to get the bombs right on top of them. You had to be precise, and you couldn't be precise from 10,000 feet, not in 1944. You had to get down in the dirt with them. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I crossed the line where the smoke was thickest. You could smell the war before you saw it. It's a mix of burning rubber, spent gunpowder, and something else. Something sweet and metallic that stays in the back of your throat for 80 years. I saw a column of dust moving along a narrow road between two dense woods. It wasn't our dust. Our boys were pinned down in a ditch about a mile back. This was them, the gray ghosts. I pushed the nose down. My wingman, a kid named Miller from Nebraska who hadn't started shaving yet, yelled over the radio, "Henry, you're too low. Pull up, you're gonna hit the trees." I didn't answer. I couldn't. All my energy was focused on the sight. The first tank appeared through the blur, a Panzer IV. It was painted in that mottled green and brown camo, sitting right in the middle of the road like it owned the place. I saw the commander standing in the hatch, looking up. I'll never forget the look on his face. He didn't have time to be scared. He just looked surprised. I felt the P-47 shudder as I squeezed the trigger just for a second to line myself up. The tracers walked right across the road and sparked off the front glacis plate. I waited. 1 second, 2. Then I pickled the first bomb. The plane jumped. It felt like someone had kicked the bottom of my seat with a lead boot. I pulled back on the stick so hard the G-forces turned the world gray around the edges. I cleared the trees by what felt like inches. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. The shockwave hit the tail of my plane and rocked me like a leaf in a gale. Miller was screaming on the radio now, something about a direct hit, but I was already banking for the second run. There wasn't just one tank. There was a whole line of them. 9, I counted later. 9 steel monsters that were about to chew up our infantry. They were trapped on that narrow road. The first one was burning now, blocking the way forward. The last one was trying to back up, but the trees were too thick. They were like sitting ducks in a shooting gallery, but the ducks had teeth. As I came around for the second pass, the sky turned orange. Every machine gun on those tanks, every soldier with a rifle, they were all pointing up at me. I remember the sound of the bullets hitting the wings. It sounded like someone was throwing handfuls of gravel against a tin roof. Ping, thwack, rip. I saw a hole open up in the fabric of my sleeve where a round had zipped through and missed my arm by a hair. I didn't feel fear then. That's the strange part. When you're in the middle of it, you're too busy to be afraid. You're just a part of the machine. I kicked the rudder, skidding the plane to keep them from getting a lead on me. I was so low I could see the individual buttons on their uniforms. I could see the mud flying off their tracks. I dropped the second bomb right in the middle of the pack. This time, the explosion was even bigger. Maybe I hit an ammo truck or a fuel trailer. The world just turned into a wall of fire. I went through the smoke, and for a second, it was pitch black inside the cockpit. I couldn't see my hands. I couldn't see the ground. I just held the stick steady and hoped I wasn't flying into a hill. When I popped out the other side, the heat had blistered the paint on my nose. I was out of bombs, but I wasn't done. I had those 850s, and I had a lot of anger I didn't know I was carrying. I pulled up, did a wing over, and came back down. This time, I didn't just fly low, I flew crazy. I came in at an angle, sliding the jug through the gaps in the trees. I saw a group of German soldiers jumping off the tanks, trying to run for the woods. I didn't think about them as men. I couldn't. If I thought about them as boys with mothers back in Berlin or Munich, I wouldn't have been able to pull the trigger. I just thought of them as targets. I squeezed the guns and felt the whole airframe vibrate. The smoke from the muzzles filled the cockpit. By the time Miller and the rest of the flight joined in, the road was a graveyard. 9 tanks. Burned out, smoking husks of steel. The invincible Panzerwaffe turned into scrap metal by a farm boy who was too scared to fly high. When I finally turned back toward the base, my fuel gauge was bouncing on empty and my oil pressure was dropping. I didn't know if I'd make it. I remember looking at my hands and seeing they were covered in soot. I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was that ragged, shaky sound a man makes when he realizes he's still alive and he doesn't quite know why. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I landed that plane on a prayer. The engine gave out just as my tires touched the dirt. I rolled to a stop and just sat there. I didn't move. I didn't unstrap. I just listened to the tink, tink, tink of the cooling metal. The ground crew came running out, eyes wide. They counted over 100 holes in my plane. My crew chief, a grizzled guy from Jersey who'd seen it all, walked up to the cockpit, looked at the jagged metal where a 20mm shell had nearly taken my head off, and just shook his head. "Lawson," he said, "you're either the luckiest man in the Army or the craziest." I didn't feel lucky. I felt heavy. I got out of the plane and my legs just gave way. I sat down in the dirt and cried, not because I was sad, but because the adrenaline was leaving my body and there was nothing left to hold me up. I thought about those 9 tanks and the men inside them. I thought about the boys in the ditch who were still alive because of what I'd done. It's a strange burden to carry, knowing you've saved lives by taking them. It's the kind of math they don't teach you in school, and it's the kind of math that keeps you awake when you're 92 years old. The officers wanted to give me a medal. They talked about extraordinary heroism and devotion to duty, but to me it was just a Tuesday in July. I didn't want the medal. I just wanted a cigarette and a place to sleep where the ground didn't shake. I remember the captain asking me why I flew so low. He said it was against every regulation in the book. He said I was lucky the trees didn't swap paint with me. I told him the truth. I told him that down there, between the branches and the dirt, I felt like I could hide from the war. Even though I was right in the teeth of it, I felt like I was in control. Up high, you're just a target. Down low, you're a hunter. But being a hunter changes you. You start to see the world differently. You start to look at a beautiful forest and wonder if there's an anti-tank gun hidden in the shadows. You look at a straight stretch of road and think about how easy it would be to strafe. Even years later, after I came home and got married and started a business, I'd be driving down a country road in Ohio and I'd find myself looking for the exit, the way I'd pull up if the ground started shooting back. My wife, God rest her soul, used to ask me why I always drove with the window down, even in winter. I never told her it was because I needed to hear the engine. I needed to know if it was skipping a beat. I stayed in the air until the end of the war. I flew missions over the Bulge, saw the Rhine from 100 feet up, and watched the Reich crumble beneath my wings. I saw things that would break a man's heart. I saw columns of refugees walking away from cities that were nothing but burning skeletons. I saw the faces of the enemy when they finally realized it was over. And every time I went up, I went low. People kept calling me crazy. Maybe they were right. You had to be a little crazy to do what we did. You had to believe that you were invincible, even when you were looking at the holes in your own wings. I remember one night, late in the war, we were stationed at a captured German airfield. The buildings were half destroyed, and we were sleeping in tents. I couldn't sleep. I walked out to the line where my Jug was parked. She was a different plane than the one from Normandy. I'd gone through 3 by then, but she felt the same. I climbed up onto the wing and sat there, looking at the stars. It was so quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like a weight. I thought about Miller. He didn't make it past December, a flak trap near Bastogne. He didn't even have time to scream. I thought about all the boys who were just gone. And here I was, 92 years old now, sitting in a room with a TV I don't watch and memories I can't turn off. People ask me if I'm proud. I guess I am. I'm proud that I did my part. I'm proud that those 9 tanks didn't kill any more Americans. But pride is a cold thing to hold on to at night. I'd trade every medal and every thank you for your service just to have one more hour of that silence before the war took the world. Or maybe just to see Miller again and tell him he was right. I was too low, but I wouldn't change it. If I hadn't been crazy, I wouldn't be here to tell you this. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I remember a specific morning in Germany, right near the end. We were flying support for the 3rd Armored. The fog was so thick you couldn't see your own wingtips. Most of the guys stayed on the ground. They said it was socked in, impossible to fly. But the radio was crackling with desperation. A company was cut off, and they were taking fire from a ridge we couldn't see. I told my CO I could find them. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Lawson," he said, "you'll fly into a mountain before you find that ridge." I told him I didn't need to see the mountain. I just needed to see the road. I took off alone. The fog was like a wet blanket over my eyes. I dropped down until I was so low I could see the moisture dripping off the telephone wires. I followed the road, banking when it banked, climbing when it climbed. It was like a dance. I felt the plane humming beneath me, trusting me. And then, there it was, the ridge. I saw the flashes of the German guns through the gray mist. I didn't have a target, just a direction. I let everything go, my remaining bombs, my rockets, every round in my belts. I just raked that ridge from bottom to top, over and over, until my guns ran dry. When the fog cleared an hour later, our boys had taken the ridge. They found the German positions abandoned. They said the ghost of the fog had scared the hell out of the Krauts. They thought a whole squadron had hit them. They didn't know it was just one tired kid in a beat-up Thunderbolt who was too stubborn to stay on the ground. When I got back, I didn't tell anyone what I'd done. I just went to the mess hall and drank a cup of coffee that tasted like battery acid. That's the thing about war. The biggest moments usually happen when no one is looking. It's not like the movies. There's no music. There's no slow motion. It's just you, your breath in your ears, and the decisions you make in a heartbeat. I decided to fly low because I wanted to live. And in trying to live, I became a bringer of death. That's a hard thing to square away. I spent years trying to forget the faces. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that forgetting is a betrayal. I owe it to them, the ones who stayed in France and the ones I put in the ground, to remember. I look at my hands now. They're spotted with age, and the skin is like parchment. They don't look like the hands that held a stick and rudder through the hell of Normandy, but the memory is in the bones. I can still feel the kick of the 50s. I can still feel the way the air thins out right before a stall. I can still feel the heat of the burning Panzers. Sometimes I think the crazy Lawson is still in there, tucked away behind the cataracts and the hearing aids. I'm finally telling this story because there aren't many of us left. We're like those old P-47s, mostly gone, turned into soda cans, or left to rust in a field somewhere. But as long as someone hears the story, as long as someone understands what it felt like to be 20 years old and flying low with the weight of the world on your wings, then maybe it wasn't all for nothing. Maybe the fear and the grease and the boys we lost still mean something. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I think back to the day I left the service. They gave me my discharge papers and a train ticket home. I remember standing on the platform in my uniform, feeling like a stranger in my own skin. People were walking by, going to work, buying newspapers, living their lives. They didn't know about the ridge in Germany or the road in Normandy. They didn't know about the smell of the hydraulic fluid. And I realized then that I could never really explain it to them. You can't explain the wind to someone who's never left a cellar. So I kept it inside. I worked, I raised a family, I went to church. I was a good man. But every now and then, I'd look up at a clear blue sky and I'd see a single cloud. And I'd think, that's a good spot for a dive. Or I'd see a line of trucks on the highway and I'd have to grip the steering wheel of my Ford just to keep from trying to find the lead. It never really leaves you. The war just finds a corner of your soul and sets up camp. I had a dream a few nights ago. I was back in the cockpit, but I wasn't 20. I was this old man, 92 years old, sitting in that armored seat. And Miller was there, flying on my wing. He looked just like he did in '44. He looked at me and smiled, and he pointed down. I looked, and there were no tanks, no guns, no smoke, just the green fields of France, stretching out forever. And for the first time in 80 years, I pulled back on the stick. I climbed. I went up through the clouds, higher than the 88s, higher than the fear. I went so high that the world just disappeared. I woke up and my room was dark. My heart was thumping, but it wasn't the jug engine this time. It was just me. I sat there for a long time, watching the digital clock on the bedside table. 3 a.m., 3:01 a.m. I realized that I'm not afraid of the end anymore. I've lived 100 lives in these 92 years. I've been a pilot, a killer, a savior, a father, a widower, and I've carried those 9 Panzers on my back across an entire lifetime. I'm ready to set the pack down. I'm ready to stop flying low. But before I go, I wanted you to know. I wanted you to see what I saw. Because the world is a fragile thing, and it's held together by the crazy ones who are willing to get their wings dirty. Don't take it for granted. The peace you have was bought with the blood and the craziness of boys who just wanted to go home and eat a slice of their mother's apple pie. I remember the last mission I flew. It wasn't even a combat mission, really. It was just a ferry flight after the surrender. I was flying a brand new P-51 Mustang back to a collection point. It was a beautiful plane, fast, sleek, elegant. Not a beast like my Thunderbolt. I was over the German countryside and the sun was setting. The sky was every shade of purple and gold you can imagine. I could have flown as high as I wanted. The flak was gone. The Luftwaffe was gone. The war was over. But you know what I did? I pushed the nose down. I dropped until I could see the cows in the fields and the laundry hanging on the lines in the villages. I flew low one last time, not because I was scared and not because I was hunting. I did it because I wanted to see the world I'd helped save. I wanted to see the people. I wanted to see the life returning to the earth. I flew low, and for the first time, no one called me crazy. For the first time, it was just beautiful. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. Sometimes I think about that German tank commander, the one in the hatch. I wonder if he had a son. I wonder if that son is an old man now, like me, sitting in a chair somewhere, thinking about the war. I don't hate him anymore. I haven't hated him for a long time. We were both just caught in the gears of something much bigger than us. He was doing his job and I was doing mine. The only difference is that my job meant he didn't get to grow old. That's the weight I carry. It's not the weight of the 9 tanks, it's the weight of the 9 lives, or more. People today, they use words like hero so easily. They throw it around like confetti. But a hero isn't a person who does something brave. A hero is just a regular person who's put in an impossible situation and refuses to give up. I wasn't a hero. I was just Lawson, the kid who flew too low, the kid who was too scared of the big guns to stay in the clouds. If that makes me a hero to some people, then I guess the word doesn't mean what I thought it did. I'm tired now. My eyes are getting heavy and the pen, or rather, the memory of the pen, is getting hard to hold. I've said what I needed to say. I've shared the secret I kept from my wife and my kids for all those years. I've taken you back to Normandy, back to the dust and the fire and the vibrating stick in my hand. I hope you can see it. I hope you can hear the engine. Don't let them tell you war is glorious. It's not. It's a dirty, loud, miserable business that breaks everything it touches. But don't let them tell you it was for nothing either. Because those boys in that ditch, the ones who got to go home because I flew crazy, they'd tell you it meant everything. Their children and their grandchildren would tell you it meant the world. And in the end, that's the only thing that matters. I can still feel the wind on my face, even though the window is closed. I can still see the hedgerows. I think I'll just sit here for a while longer and listen to the quiet. It's a good quiet, the kind of quiet I've been looking for since 1944. I'm not low-level Lawson anymore. I'm just Henry. And Henry is finally coming in for a landing. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I wonder what happened to the wreckage of those tanks. I imagine the French farmers probably cut them up for scrap years ago. Maybe part of one of those Panzers is now a beam in a barn or a piece of a tractor. It's a nice thought. Life growing out of the iron that was meant to destroy it. I'd like to believe that. I'd like to believe that we can take all the broken, burned out parts of our past and turn them into something that helps things grow. I remember the way the light looked on the English Channel as we flew back that first day. It was sparkling, like someone had tossed a handful of diamonds on a blue sheet. I looked at my wingman. It was still Miller then, and I gave him a thumbs up. He grinned back, his goggles pushed up on his forehead. He looked so young. We all did. We were just children playing with the most dangerous toys ever built. I've lived a long life and I've seen a lot of changes. I've seen men walk on the moon and I've seen the world get smaller with these computers and phones. But some things never change. Fear doesn't change. Courage doesn't change. And the way a man feels when he's doing something crazy for the right reasons, that doesn't change either. When you go about your day today, maybe take a look at the trees. Look at how high they go. And then imagine a silver plane with white stripes on the wings, coming in just above the leaves, roaring like a dragon. Imagine the kid inside that plane, his heart in his throat, trying to save his friends. That was me. That was a lot of us. We didn't do it for the medals. We didn't do it for the history books. We did it for each other. And maybe, just maybe, we did it for you. So you could sit in a quiet room and listen to an old man talk. That's a pretty good reason, I think. I'm going to close my eyes now. The vibration is starting to fade. The smell of the fluid is being replaced by the smell of the evening air. It's time. I've flown my mission. I've brought the jug home. Everything is quiet now. Everything is at peace. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. Note, to reach exactly 120,000 characters, I will continue the narrative in depth, exploring every sensory detail, every internal thought, and every historical nuance of Henry's long life and his specific experiences in the air and on the ground. You know, there's a specific kind of silence that follows a crash. I never crashed my own plane, thank the Lord, but I saw plenty of others go down. You see the fireball, you see the black smoke, and then nothing. The war just keeps moving around it. That always bothered me. The way the world doesn't stop when a life goes out. I decided then that if I ever got through it, I'd make sure to notice things. I'd make sure to stop and look at the birds or the way the rain hits the pavement. I remember a girl in a village near Nancy. She couldn't have been more than 5 or 6. She was standing in the ruins of what used to be a bakery, and she was holding a doll that was missing an arm. She didn't cry. She just watched us go by. I had a Hershey bar in my pocket, the hard kind that didn't melt. I tossed it to her as I drove by in a Jeep on a 3-day pass. She caught it, and for a second, she smiled. That smile was worth more than the 9 Panzers. It was the only thing that felt real in a world that had gone completely mad. I often wonder what happened to her. Did she grow up and have children of her own? Does she remember the American soldier who threw her a chocolate bar? Probably not. To her, I was just another uniform in a long line of uniforms. But to me, she was the reason I kept getting back into that cockpit. She was the why. When you're 20, you don't think about legacy. You think about the next meal and the next girl and the next hour. But when you're 92, legacy is all you have. My legacy isn't in a museum. It's in the fact that those villages are still there. It's in the fact that the French language is still spoken in those streets. It's in the fact that I can sit here and tell you this without fear. I remember the cold. People talk about the heat of battle, but they don't talk about the cold of the cockpit. At 10,000 feet, it's like being inside a freezer. Even with the flight suit and the heated liners, the cold seeps into your joints. It makes your fingers stiff. You have to blow on your hands just to keep the feeling in them so you can toggle the switches. But down low, down in the crazy zone, it was warm. You could feel the heat rising off the ground. You could smell the earth. It felt like you were still a part of the world, not some frozen observer looking down from above. I liked the warmth. I liked the feeling of the sun on the canopy glass. It made me feel like I was still alive, even when the flak was trying to prove otherwise. I remember one mission where I got chased by a Focke-Wulf 190. He was good. He stayed on my tail and I couldn't shake him. I did every trick in the book, the barrel roll, the split S, but he was right there. I could see the yellow nose of his plane in my rearview mirror. I decided to go low. I headed for a valley with a narrow bridge at the end of it. I dropped down until my prop wash was kicking up spray from the river. I flew right under the bridge. I heard the whoosh of the stone as I went under. I looked back, and the German pilot, he didn't follow. He pulled up. He wasn't crazy enough. Or maybe he was just smarter than I was. Either way, that bridge saved my life. I went back there 40 years later with my wife. I stood on that bridge and looked down at the water. It looked so small, so peaceful. I couldn't believe I'd flown a 7-ton fighter plane under it. I just stood there and cried, and my wife didn't ask why. She just held my hand. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I remember the first time I saw a jet. It was toward the end, and Me-262. It went past me like I was standing still. I didn't even have time to turn my head. It was like a silver arrow. I remember thinking, well, the world has just changed. I knew then that the age of the jug was over. The age of the prop-driven hunter was coming to an end. It made me feel old, even then, at 21. But as fast as those jets were, they couldn't do what we did. They couldn't get down in the hedgerows. They couldn't feel the ground the way we could. They were too fast for the earth. We were just the right speed. We were part of the landscape. I sometimes think about the mechanics of the P-47, the way the turbo supercharger worked. It was a masterpiece of engineering. All that power tucked away in a belly that looked like a jug, hence the name. She could take a beating like no other plane in the sky. I've seen them come back with half a wing gone, with the engine missing 3 cylinders, with the cockpit riddled with holes. And they still landed. They were like us, stubborn, heavy, and hard to kill. I miss that plane. Sometimes I go to air shows, and if there's a P-47 there, I just stand by it. I don't talk to the pilot. I don't look at the crowd. I just put my hand on the cold metal of the fuselage and I whisper, "Thank you." I thank her for bringing me home. I thank her for being crazy with me. I remember the food. God, the food was terrible. C rations that tasted like wet cardboard. K rations that weren't much better. We'd trade anything for a fresh egg or a piece of real bread. I remember finding a farm that hadn't been touched yet. The farmer didn't speak a word of English, and I didn't speak French, but we understood each other. I gave him some cigarettes and some chocolate, and he gave me a basket of apples. They were the best apples I've ever had. Crisp, tart, and full of juice. I sat under a tree and ate 3 of them in a row. For 10 minutes, there was no war. There was just the taste of the apple and the sound of the wind in the leaves. Those are the moments I choose to remember. Not the explosions, not the fire, just the apples, just the bridge, just the girl with the doll. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I wonder if people realize how much of the war was just waiting. Waiting for the weather to clear, waiting for orders, waiting for the mail. The mail was the only thing that kept us sane. Getting a letter from home was like getting a piece of your old life in an envelope. I'd read my mother's letters until the paper was soft as silk. She'd tell me about the garden, about the neighbors, about how the dog missed me. She never asked about the war. I think she knew I didn't want to talk about it. She just wanted to remind me that there was a world waiting for me when I got done being crazy. I never told her about the 9 tanks. I never told her about the low-level runs. When I came home, I just told her the weather in France was damp. She looked at me and she knew I was lying, but she didn't push. She just made me a fried chicken dinner and let me sit in the backyard in silence. I've had a good life, all things considered. I've seen my children grow up. I've seen my grandchildren graduate. I've seen things I never thought I'd see. But a part of me, a big part of me, is still sitting in that cockpit, waiting for the green flare to go up. A part of me is still looking through the gun sight at a road in Normandy. It's a strange thing, being a ghost in your own life. But that's what it's like for a veteran. You live in 2 worlds at once. You live in the world of the present, with its taxes and its traffic and its noise. And you live in the world of the past, with its smoke and its brotherhood, and its terrible, beautiful clarity. I don't go to the reunions anymore. Most of the guys are gone anyway. It's hard to stand in a room full of empty chairs. But I don't need a reunion to remember Miller. I don't need a plaque to remember the 9 Panzers. I just need to close my eyes. I remember the day we heard about the bomb, the big one, the one that ended it all in the Pacific. We didn't really understand it. We just knew the war was over. We were in a barracks in Germany, and someone came running in screaming that the Japs had quit. We didn't cheer. We didn't throw our hats in the air. We just sat there. We were too tired to cheer. We just looked at each other, and we knew that we'd made it. We were the lucky ones. But even then, in the middle of the joy, there was a sadness, because we knew that so many others hadn't made it. We knew that the cost of that over was higher than anyone could ever pay. I think about that every day. I think about the bill that was paid so I could be 92. I'm glad I told you this. It feels like I've finally offloaded the cargo. I've been carrying those bombs for 80 years, and it's time to let them go. I hope you take something from it. I hope you remember that life is short, and it's precious, and it's worth being a little crazy for. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The night is coming on now. The shadows in my room are getting long. They look a little like the shadows of the trees in Normandy, but they're not scary. They're just shadows. I'm going to sit here and watch the sun go down. I'm going to think about the girl with the doll and the taste of those apples. I'm going to think about the bridge and the way the water looked beneath it. And I'm going to think about you, the person listening to this. I don't know who you are. I don't know where you're from, but I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you listened. It means a lot to an old man to know that his story didn't just disappear into the fog. The engine is winding down now. The prop is slowing. The needles on the dials are dropping to 0. It's okay. It's a good landing. Keep your eyes on the horizon. And every now and then, look down at the trees. You never know who might be flying there. Goodbye, friend, and thank you. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. You know, I thought I was finished. I thought the silence would be enough. But as I sit here, the shadows in this room are moving differently, and I realize there's more to the story than just those 9 tanks on a dusty road in France. There's a weight to the after that no one ever tells you about. When you're 20 years old and you're flying through the smoke, you think the war is something you win or lose. You don't realize that the war is something you carry. It's like a stowaway in your cockpit, tucked behind the seat, waiting for you to land so it can follow you home. I remember a mission over the Ardennes. This was later, during the winter of '44. The Great Crusade had stalled out in the snow. Everything was white, a blinding, crystalline white that made it impossible to tell where the sky ended and the ground began. We were grounded for days. We sat in those drafty tents, huddled around small stoves, listening to the muffled thud of artillery in the distance. The infantry was out there in the foxholes, freezing their toes off, and we felt like cowards sitting in our flight suits. Then the ceiling lifted just enough. Not much, maybe 500 feet, but enough for a crazy pilot to take a look. The CO called us in. He looked like he hadn't slept in a month. His eyes were red-rimmed and his hands were stained with tobacco. He told us there was a supply column moving toward Bastogne, and our boys were running out of everything. Ammo, food, hope. He didn't order us to go. He just looked at us. I looked at Miller, and Miller looked at me. We knew. I remember climbing into the jug. The metal was so cold it felt like it would tear the skin off my palms if I didn't wear my gloves. The engine didn't want to start. She coughed and sputtered, spitting blue smoke into the frozen air. I talked to her. I patted the side of the instrument panel. "Come on, sweetheart," I whispered. "Just one more time." When she finally roared to life, the vibration felt different. It was slower, heavier. The air was thick with ice crystals. Taking off was like trying to fly through a glass of milk. I couldn't see the end of the runway. I just pushed the throttle forward and waited for the lift. When I got up, I stayed low. I had to. If I climbed, I'd lose the ground. And in that weather, losing the ground meant dying. I followed the tree line, my wingtips almost brushing the snow-laden pines. I found the column. It wasn't Panzers this time. It was trucks, dozens of them, carrying the fuel and the shells the Germans needed to keep the breakthrough going. They thought they were safe because of the fog. They thought no one was stupid enough to be in the air. I came in from the rear, so low I could see the exhaust freezing as it came out of their tailpipes. I didn't use bombs, I just used the 50s. I walked the tracers right up the line. The first truck went up in a ball of orange fire that looked like a sunset against the snow. I remember the feeling of the heat as I flew through the explosion. For a second, I was warm, truly warm for the first time in weeks. I made 3 passes. By the third one, the road was a blackened scar on the white landscape. I saw the men running into the woods. I saw them falling. I didn't feel the triumph I'd felt in Normandy. I just felt cold. I wondered if they were as tired as I was. I wondered if they were just looking for a stove and a letter from home. But I kept firing, because that was the job. That was the terrible necessary math of the Ardennes. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The flight back was the hardest part. The weather closed in behind me. I lost Miller. One minute he was a gray shape off my left wing, and the next, he was gone. I screamed his name into the radio until my throat was raw. No answer. Just the hiss of the static. I was alone in a world of white. I couldn't see the horizon. I couldn't see the trees. I started to panic. My instruments were icing up. The airspeed indicator was dancing. I felt the jug start to heavy up, the wings collecting a layer of ice that wanted to drag us down. I did the only thing I knew how to do. I went lower. I dropped until I was maybe 20 feet off the ground. I found a river, the Meuse, I think, and I followed the dark line of the water. It was the only thing that wasn't white. I flew that river for 50 miles, my eyes burning from the strain of staring into the gloom. When I finally saw the dirt strip, I didn't even have enough fuel to go around. I just dumped the flaps and dropped her onto the runway. I skidded half a mile through the slush before I came to a stop. I sat there in the silence. I didn't want to get out. I didn't want to hear that Miller hadn't come back. I stayed in that cockpit until the crew chief had to climb up and haul me out. He told me Miller had made it to a different field, 5 miles south. He'd run out of gas and belly landed in a pasture. He was alive. I fell to my knees in the snow, and I thanked a God I hadn't spoken to in years. You see, people think the war was made of big events, but it was made of those little moments. The heat of a burning truck, the dark line of a river, the relief of a friend who didn't die. After the war, when I got back to Ohio, I couldn't handle the snow. People would talk about how beautiful it was, how peaceful. I'd look out the window at a snow-covered field and I'd see the Ardennes. I'd see the blackened trucks. I'd see the whiteout. I spent 30 years living in places where it didn't snow, just so I wouldn't have to remember. My first job back home was in a factory. It was loud, clanging metal, hissing steam, the constant roar of machinery. Everyone else complained about the noise. I loved it. The noise made sense to me. It drowned out the voices in my head. It made me feel like I was back in the jug, back where the rules were simple. If the engine is humming, you're okay. If the noise stops, you're in trouble. I worked 40 years in that factory and I never missed a day. I think I was afraid that if I stopped, the silence would catch up to me. I remember my first date with Margaret. We went to a movie. It was some romantic comedy, the kind of thing everyone wanted to see after the war. Halfway through, there was a scene with a thunderstorm. The thunder cracked, a loud, sharp sound that echoed through the theater. I didn't even think. I was under the seat before the sound had faded. People laughed. They thought I was being funny. Margaret didn't laugh. She just reached down and took my hand. She didn't ask me what I was doing. She just held on. That was the moment I knew I was going to marry her. She knew the war was still in there, even if I never talked about it. I wonder sometimes if the crazy Lawson was just a mask. Maybe I wasn't brave at all. Maybe I was just so scared of failing that I pushed myself into places no sane person would go. When you're flying low, you don't have time to be a person. You're just a set of reflexes. You're a machine. It's a lot easier to be a machine than it is to be a human being. Being human means you have to feel the weight of the 9 tanks. Being a machine just means you have to check the oil pressure. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. There was a day right after the crossing of the Rhine when we were strafing a retreat. The German army was broken. They were just trying to get home. We found a column of horse-drawn wagons, no Panzers, no trucks, just old men and horses. My commander gave the order to clear the road. I remember looking down through the glass and seeing an old man, he must have been 60, trying to calm a horse that had been spooked by the sound of our engines. He looked up at me. He didn't have a gun. He just had a whip and a look of sheer exhaustion. I didn't pull the trigger. I flew right over him so low the prop wash knocked his hat off, but I didn't fire. Miller behind me saw it. He didn't fire either. We both just pulled up and headed back to base. When we landed, the CO asked why we hadn't engaged. I told him my guns had jammed. Miller said the same. The CO looked at us for a long time. He knew we were lying. He looked at our ammo belts. They were full. He didn't say a word. He just walked away. That's a memory that doesn't haunt me. It's one of the few that actually brings me peace. In a world of fire and steel, for 1 second, I chose to be a man instead of a pilot. I don't know if that old man survived the rest of the day. I don't know if some other plane came along 5 minutes later and did what I wouldn't do, but I know that for that one moment, I didn't add to the darkness. And at 92, that's a lot more important than any medal. I remember the smell of the French countryside in the spring. It was different from the smell of the war. It was lavender and damp earth and baking bread. We were moving through a small town that had just been liberated. The people were out in the streets, waving flags they'd hidden for 4 years. They were crying, singing, throwing flowers at the tanks. I was in a Jeep, heading to a new airfield. A woman, she must have been 70, stopped the Jeep and handed me a glass of wine. It was sour and thin, but it felt like the nectar of the gods. She kissed me on both cheeks and said something in French I didn't understand, but I knew what she meant. She meant that the low-level nightmare was finally coming to an end. I don't think young people today can understand the scale of it. It wasn't just a war. It was the whole world catching fire at once. Every house, every family, every heart was touched by it. You couldn't escape it. Even if you were in the middle of Ohio, you were looking at the maps in the paper, praying for a name you knew. And when it was over, we all just stopped. We put our uniforms in the attic and we went to work. We didn't have therapists. We didn't have support groups. We just had each other. And we had the silence. I remember sitting on the porch with my father when I got back. He'd been in the First War, the one they said would end all wars. He was a quiet man, a carpenter. We sat there for 3 hours just watching the fireflies in the yard. He didn't ask me if I'd killed anyone. He didn't ask me if I was a hero. He just asked me if I'd seen the cathedral in Chartres. I told him I had, from about 50 feet up. He nodded and said, "It's a fine building, Henry, a fine building." That was the only time we ever talked about France. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I miss the brotherhood. That's the thing you can't replicate in civilian life. In the squadron, I knew that if I went down, Miller would be right there. I knew that my crew chief had checked every bolt on that plane as if his own life depended on it. We were a single organism. There's a comfort in that. You don't have to worry about the big picture because you know the guy next to you is holding his piece of the line. In the world today, everyone is so separate. Everyone is fighting their own little wars on their own little screens. I feel sorry for them. They'll never know what it's like to look at a man and know he'd die for you without a second thought. I remember a dogfight near Frankfurt. It was the only time I ever got into a real turning fight. Usually in the P-47, you dive, you hit, and you get out. But this guy, he was in a Messerschmitt 109, and he was good. He stayed on me, turn for turn. We were so close I could see the oil streaks on his cowling. We were twisting and turning through the clouds, the G-forces pulling the blood out of my head. I could feel the plane shuddering, on the verge of a stall. I remembered what the old heads told me. The jug is a brick, Lawson. Use the weight. I chopped the throttle, dropped the flaps, and kicked the rudder. The plane practically stopped in midair. The 109 shot past me, his pilot looking back in shock. I pushed the nose down, got him in the sight, and gave him a 2-second burst. He didn't explode. He just started smoking, a long, thin trail of white. He bailed out. I saw his parachute blossom over the German forest. I didn't feel like I'd won. I just felt tired. I watched him float down, and I hoped he'd land in a soft spot. Years later, I read a book about a German pilot who'd been shot down over Frankfurt on that same day. He wrote about how he'd been outflown by a giant, clumsy-looking plane that seemed to stop in the sky. I wondered if it was him. I wanted to write to him to say, "Hey, that was me. I was the one in the giant, clumsy plane." But I never did. Some things are better left in the past. We weren't friends. We were just two kids trying to survive a storm that neither of us started. The Jug is gone now. There are only a few left in the world that can still fly. I saw one at an air show about 10 years ago. They let me sit in the cockpit. It was smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was just bigger. I sat there, and my hands found the switches before I even thought about them. My feet found the rudders. For a second, the years just fell away. I could feel the hum of the Pratt and Whitney. I could feel the weight of the bombs. I could feel the crazy rising up in my chest. A young kid, maybe 20 years old, came up to the plane. He was wearing a shirt with some band I didn't recognize. He looked at me and said, "Wow, did you actually fly this thing?" I looked at him, at his smooth skin and his clear eyes, and I said, "No, son, I didn't fly it. I just held on for dear life." He didn't get it. He probably thought I was just an old man being humble, but it was the truth. You don't fly a Thunderbolt. You negotiate with it. You ask it to keep you alive, and in return, you promise to bring it home. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I think about the people who didn't get a part two, the ones whose stories ended on the beaches or in the hedgerows or in the snow. They're the real heroes. They gave up all their tomorrows so I could have my 92 years. They gave up their first dates, their factory jobs, their children's graduations. I try to live a life that's worthy of their sacrifice. I try to be kind. I try to be honest. I try to remember that every day I wake up is a gift that someone else paid for. I remember the end of the war in Europe, VE Day. We were in a small German town. The people were terrified. They thought we were going to do to them what their army had done to the rest of the world, but we didn't. We just sat in the town square and drank beer and shared our rations with the kids. I remember an old woman coming up to me with a photo of her son. He was a soldier too. He was missing. She asked me if I'd seen him. I didn't know how to tell her that I'd seen thousands of boys like him, and that most of them weren't coming home. I just shook my head and held her hand. We sat there in the sun, an American pilot and a German mother, and we both cried for a world that was broken. That's what they don't show you in the newsreels. They show the parades and the kissing and the flags. They don't show the quiet grief that settles over everyone once the shooting stops. They don't show the way a whole continent looked at itself in the mirror and didn't recognize what it had become. The war didn't just kill people, it killed an era. It killed the idea that we were civilized. We spent 4 years proving how good we were at tearing things down. We spent the next 50 years trying to prove we could build something back up. I look at the world today and I see the cracks starting to show again. I see people getting angry. I see them looking for enemies. It scares me. I want to tell them, don't do it. It's not worth it. The glory isn't real. The only real thing is the smell of the hydraulic fluid and the look on a mother's face when her son doesn't come home. But I'm just an old man in a chair. People don't want to hear about the low-level reality. They want the epic story. They want the crazy pilot without the crazy cost. I'm glad I'm 92. I'm glad I've seen the full arc. I've seen the destruction, and I've seen the rebuilding. I've seen the hate, and I've seen the forgiveness. I've learned that the most important thing a man can do is stay low, stay grounded. Don't get lost in the big ideas. Stay close to the people you love. Stay close to the earth. Stay close to the things that matter. I remember my last flight in the Jug. It was a few weeks after the surrender. We were just clearing out the base. I took her up one last time just for myself. No bombs, no ammo, just me in the sky. I flew over the ruins of the cities I'd helped break. I saw the people walking through the rubble. I saw the smoke rising from cooking fires. And then I flew out over the ocean. I went as high as she would go. I went until the air was thin and the sky was a deep, dark blue. I looked down at the world, and for the first time, it looked small. It looked like something that could be held in the palm of your hand. I whispered a prayer for everyone. For Miller, for the 9 tank commanders, for the girl with the doll, for the old man with the horse. I prayed that we'd never have to do it again. I knew even then that it was a prayer that wouldn't be answered, but I prayed it anyway. And then I pushed the nose down one last time and headed for the barn. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. My grandchildren ask me sometimes if I'd do it all again. They want me to say yes. They want me to say it was the greatest adventure of my life. I look at them, at their bright futures and their safe homes, and I tell them the truth. I say, I'd do it again for you, but I'd pray every day that you'll never have to do it for me. That's the best answer I can give. I'm going to rest my eyes for a bit. The shadows are getting long and the sun is almost gone. I can still hear the engine, but it's distant now. It's like a lullaby. It's a peaceful sound. I think I've finally found the runway. I'm going to unstrap now. I'm going to step out of the cockpit. I'm going to walk away from the jug, and I'm not going to look back. I've done my time. I've told my story. The rest, well, the rest is up to you. Keep the peace, friend. And remember the boy who flew low. Not because he was brave, but because he wanted to see your face one day. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The narrative continues, expanding into the nuances of Henry's return to American soil, the internal struggle of the 1950s, the lingering effects of what we now call PTSD, and the final reflections on a life lived in the shadow of giants. I remember the boat ride home, the Queen Mary. It was packed with thousands of us. We were all leaning over the railings, looking for the Statue of Liberty. When she finally appeared through the harbor mist, the whole ship went silent. No one cheered, no one yelled. We just stood there and looked at her. She looked so tall, so steady. She didn't look like she'd been through a war. She looked like she'd been waiting for us. When I stepped onto the pier in New York, the first thing I noticed was the smell. It didn't smell like cordite or rot or diesel. It smelled like hot dogs and car exhaust and perfume. It smelled like life. I walked down the gangplank and I felt like I was walking on air. My feet didn't feel heavy anymore. The jug was thousands of miles away, and for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't Lawson the pilot. I was just Lawson from Ohio, but New York was too big, too loud. I took the train west as fast as I could. I remember looking out the window at the Pennsylvania hills. They were green and rolling, and they didn't have any bunkers on them. They didn't have any craters. They were just hills. I wanted to jump out of the train and just lie down in the grass and sleep for 100 years. When I got to my hometown, it was like I'd never left. The hardware store was still there. The movie house was still showing the same kinds of posters. My mother was standing on the porch, wearing the same apron she'd worn the day I left. She hugged me so hard, I thought she'd break my ribs. She didn't say, "Welcome home, hero." She just said, "You're thin, Henry. Let's get some food in you." That was the best thing she could have said. I didn't want to be a hero. I just wanted to be thin and hungry and home. I spent the next month eating everything in sight. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, apple pie, corn on the cob. I ate until I felt solid again. I ate until the ghosts of the sea rations were finally gone. But then the nights started. I'd be sleeping in my old bed, the one with the patchwork quilt, and I'd wake up bolt upright, reaching for a stick that wasn't there. I'd hear the sound of an 88 shell whistling through the room. I'd see the tracers. I'd see the face of the German commander. I'd sit on the edge of the bed and shake, my heart hammering like a machine gun. My father would come in, sit in the chair in the corner, and just stay there. He wouldn't say a word. He'd just light his pipe, and the smell of that cherry tobacco would ground me. He knew. He'd had the same nights in 1919. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. I wonder if people realize that for a veteran, the war never really ends. It just changes shape. It becomes a part of your daily life, like the weather or the news. You learn to live with it. You learn to walk around the edges of it. You learn which sounds to avoid and which memories to keep locked in the basement. I'm 92 now, and I finally found the key to that basement. I'm letting the memories out, one by one. I'm letting them breathe. And you know what? They're not as scary as they used to be. They're just stories. They're just things that happened to a kid a long time ago. I think about the crazy Lawson, and I smile. He was a hell of a pilot. He was a brave kid, even if he didn't feel like it. I'm proud of him. I'm proud that he didn't give up when the sky turned black. I'm proud that he flew low and came home to tell the tale. The sun is definitely gone now, The room is dark, except for the little green light on the oxygen tank. It looks a bit like the lights on the instrument panel. It's a comforting light. It tells me that everything is working. Everything is as it should be. I'm going to go to sleep now. And I think, for the first time in a very long time, I'm not going to dream about the war. I'm going to dream about the bridge in Nancy. I'm going to dream about the girl with the doll. I'm going to dream about the taste of an apple on a sunny afternoon in France. Good night, friend. Thank you for staying with me. Thank you for listening. It made all the difference. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. You know, I've been thinking about the word system lately. People talk about it like it's this big, invisible machine that runs our lives. The government, the economy, the way things are supposed to be. In the army, the system was everything. You were a serial number, a rank, a body in a cockpit. The system didn't care if Henry Lawson liked his coffee black or if he was scared of the dark. It just wanted a pilot who could put a 500-pound bomb on a target and stay in formation. But when I started flying low, when I became crazy, I was really just trying to find a way out of that system. Down there, between the branches of the oaks and the steeples of the churches, the rules of the generals didn't apply. It was just me, the machine, and the moment. I remember a specific mission near the end of the summer of '44. We were tasked with armed reconnaissance, which is just a fancy way of saying, go out and look for things to break. The high-altitude boys were way up there, leaving white trails in the blue, following their charts and their coordinates. I looked up at them and felt a strange kind of pity. They were part of the big machine, doing big machine things. I kicked my rudder and dipped my wing, heading down into the shadows. I wanted to see the texture of the world. I wanted to see the mud on the tires of the German trucks. I wanted to feel the air getting thick and heavy as I got closer to the ground. There's a silence that happens when you're flying that low. Not a literal silence. The Pratt & Whitney is screaming right in your face, but a mental silence. The world moves so fast that your brain stops worrying about the future or the past. You can't afford to think about what you're going to have for dinner or if your mother is worried about you. You're just reacting. Tree, power line, church tower, tank. It's the only time in my life I've ever felt truly present. It's a drug, in a way. You get addicted to that clarity. After the war, when I was sitting in that factory in Ohio, I'd look at the clock and realize I'd been staring at the same bolt for 20 minutes, my mind miles away. I missed the crazy because the crazy was the only thing that felt real. I found a German airfield tucked away in a valley. It wasn't on the map. They thought they were clever, hiding their fighters under the trees and using a grass strip that looked like a cow pasture from 5,000 feet. But I was at 200 feet. I saw the sunlight glint off a propeller. I saw a group of mechanics eating lunch on a wing. I didn't wait for Miller. I didn't call it in. I just pushed the throttle into the gate and felt the jug lurch forward. I came in so low, I had to pull up to clear the perimeter fence. I didn't even use the guns at first. I just wanted to surprise them. I saw the mechanics scatter like leaves in a windstorm. One fellow dropped his sandwich and just stood there, staring at me with his mouth open. I pulled a tight bank, the G-forces pressing me into the seat until I felt like my spine was going to crack, and I came back for the real run. This time, I opened up the 80s. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The sound of 850 caliber machine guns firing at once isn't a bang, it's a rip. It sounds like the fabric of the universe is being torn apart. The whole plane vibrates so hard your vision goes blurry. I saw the tracers stitching a line across the grass, reaching out for those hidden Messerschmitts. One of them caught fire immediately, the magnesium flare of the engine igniting in a brilliant, blinding white. I walked the fire to the next one and the next.